Welcome back to the channel. My name is Lisa Elvin Staltari, and I'm a genealogist and a passionate traveler. Over the last 6 months or so, I've been focusing my attention on Les Filles à Marier, the marriageable girls, which is the companion series to my Filles du Roi series that I've been doing for several years. We are going to be exploring episode number 31 today, but there are over 260 of them, so we've got a long way to go. Um, Before we begin, let me show you ways you can support the channel. The first three keep you in the know. Subscribe, like, and notify. All of that helps my logarithms and all that good stuff. The next couple of ways are ways to help the channel grow. We have Coffee and Patreon, which are external platforms that you can contribute to either on a one-time basis or on a monthly basis. And we also have the super thanks that YouTube permits me to do now that I've reached over 1,000 subscribers. So thank you to all of you who have supported me thus far. And without further ado, let's get started and get to know our Fille Marie of this episode. Just to recap, for those of you who are unfamiliar with Les Filles Mariées, they came before Les Filles du Roi. Les Filles du Roi was a government king appointed program that ran from 1663 to 1673. Les Filles Mariées, as you can see, was a much longer period, but did not involve as many ladies. So 1634 to 1662, we have about 262 ladies who came to New France and were married. But I mean, that's 28 years, 260. That's the problem. The problem was that although they came and they had children and all of that, it just wasn't enough to populate a country, a colony, if you will. So, and that is what led to the Filles du Roi. However, these Filles Mariées are very special because they did not come with the groups of people like the Filles du Roi. The Filles du Roi came with 90 and 100 and larger groups of people. The Filles Mariées largely came by themselves or with one or two other people on the ship, if you will, other girls. They were generally recruited by either a family member or the local priest or someone, that had that connection between the two countries. So I often say, and I say this in each episode, if les filles du roi are the founding mothers of Quebec, then les filles mariées are the founding grandmothers. They really were there at the very, very beginning. So let's get to know our filles mariées of this episode. So today's episode is Marguerite Charlot, and she is a viewer request. I do not have her in my file, so it was a pleasure getting to know Marguerite a little bit better. Marguerite was born in 1632 in a place called Château-Villain in France. Her parents were François Charlot and Barbe Giraudeau. Now you can see on the map where she was born. Château-Villain is in the region of France known as the Grand Est. It's really, really on that border between, it was until the 15th century, the border between the Kingdom of France and the Duchy of Burgundy. And the département, the county that it belongs to now, is the Haute-Marne département. It has about 1,500 people living there. Its name, Châteauvillain, comes from the Latin castrum villan, which means fortified tower for castrum, and farm or domain for villanum in Gallo-Roman language. It can be traced back to the 1160, the date on which Châteauvillain was the property of the Lords of Broyes, a noble family from Aubais, who built an important dungeon of bumpy stones in a castle surrounded by an enclosure with many towers. Over time, and according to periods of peace or war, the city expanded and neighborhoods emerged along the river around the ramparts of the 12th and 14th century. Marguerite and presumably her family would at some point move to Paris and be part of the 4th arrondissement and belong to the Saint-Jean-Aigre, which is where, and there was some, not controversy, but conflict between where was Marguerite born and where did she emerge from. So I believe, and if you look at Grand Est, if you look at that region and you see where she is in Haute-Marne, she's actually not that far from Ile-de-France, which is the region of Paris. So it's logical or possible that they would have made that trek. And based on the fact that there was quite a bit of conflict in that area at the time, it makes sense. It makes sense that they would have moved, possibly for economic reasons. But that is the reason why she had put. We have a baptismal certificate saying Chateauvillain, and then we have a marriage record that says she is from Saint Jean Gagne. So those are the conflicting the conflict between her origins. So Marguerite would come to New France in 1647. We do not know if her parents were passed away. And we believe that she came with Maisonneuve himself as he returned to New France from a trip to France. So she was about 15 years old at this time. So the groom that she would select and who would select her, his name was Louis Loiselle, and he was born in 1617 in a place called Courcelles-sur-Mer. His parents were Louis Loiselle and Jeanne Le Terrier. Now, you can see by the maps that he is part of the Normandy region, and he is the Département de Calvados, and that is where he is located. Now, Courcelles-sur-Mer was known as Courcelles for until the 50s or 60s. The sur-mer was added later, and sur-mer means on the sea, and you can see by the aerial view here that it literally was. So when we talk about the beaches of Normandy, this is one of the places. So in the summertime, the place really grows from 1,500 people or so to 15,000. So it is a very, very very much a tourist attraction that people come and visit and want to see what happened here. He was a master locksmith, so he brought with him an extraordinary trade to New France. And he was baptized at the Saint-Germain Church in Courcelles, which dates back to the 13th and 14th century, I believe. So Marguerite and Louis were married January 13th, 1648 in Montreal. And this is their marriage record. So the family would settle at Montreal, which was known as Ville-Marie, and it was, started by the founder, Paul de Chomedy, Sœur de Maisonneuve, and was essentially a missionary center in May of 1642. The colony did not thrive, and it was on the verge of extinction when, by 1653, Chomedy returns to France to recruit 100 settlers who would be known as the Grand Recrues, and from this small group would evolve the Notre Dame Congregation from the sister Marguerite Bourgeois. When Montreal was founded, the new colonists were rapidly confronted by a fearsome enemy, the Iroquois. Unfortunately, there was no regular army on Montreal soil until 1665 when the Carignan-Salieres regiment landed there. But militias capable of resisting Iroquois attacks were set up. So in early January of 1663, Chomedy de Maisonneuve created the Saint-Famille militia to protect Ville-Marie and its inhabitants. It was made up of 139 voluntary colonists divided into 20 squads. So you can see that it was a particularly perilous time. Now, remember, they got married in 1648. This is just 5 years after the colony 6 years after the colony was even created. So Marguerite and Louis Loiselle are truly, truly pioneers in Montreal. So Louis Loiselle, we can see in the 1666 census, he's got he's 49. His wife Marguerite is 35. Jeanne Loiselle, his daughter, is 16. Françoise Loiselle, 14. Joseph and Barbe. And then in the 1667 census, people often ask me, why did they do a census like in another census the next year? Well, it's because they actually neglected hundreds of people, and so in true government fashion, they just said, okay, let's recount. And so this is why we're lucky enough from a genealogical standpoint to have sometimes two different versions. So we have Louis Loiselle, who obviously got younger, and he then was 48. Marguerite was 35. She stayed the same. We have Françoise, Joseph, and Barbe. We do not have Jeanne. And then we do have one type de bétail, which is a cattle. And then we have 18 hectares, which means that he had approximately 15 to 16 acres of land in that Ville-Marie. Going to find out about is the fact that two of their daughters actually were raised or went to their school, like a boarding school, with Marguerite Bourgeois, and their firstborn daughter was actually the first child born in Montreal that survived. So that is one of the legacies of the Loiselle family. But they were among the very, very first pupils of Marguerite Bourgeois and her school. So that's kind of if this is your heritage, it's truly remarkable. Louis Loiselle would join and become part of the 17th Regiment of the Saint Famille Militia. He was there defending the town of Montreal that he had helped to really pioneer. So that is one of his legacies, his courage and his determination to make Montreal safe. So let's have a look at the family that they built. They would go on to have 8 children. Jeanne, as I've stated, was the firstborn child in Montreal to survive. So she is truly the first. She would go on to marry, and she was the one that went to study with Marguerite Bourgeois. She would go on to marry Jean Beauchamp and have 8 children, 7 of whom would make it to adulthood. And then we have Françoise, who also went to study with Marguerite Bourgeois. She would go on to marry François Pilet and have 5 children, all of whom would make it. She would then marry Charles Chine and have 1 child who did not make it. Joseph would marry Jeanne Langlois and have 10 children, 5 of whom would make it. Charles, Marie-Marthe, and the second Charles would die in infancy. Barbe would marry 3 times, to Pierre Roussel, François Fafard, and François Le Gantier, but would not have any children. And she is listed as an engagée West. So she was one of those contracted persons in the West, in Detroit, in 1708 when she was 45 years old. Definitely a story there. Their final child, Louis, would die in infancy. And this is the 1681 census, where we have Louis Loiselle, who is 64 years old. We have Marguerite, who's 57. We have Joseph, their son, who is the only child living with them at that time. He's 26. They have 1 gun, 2 goats, and 30 alfavaras, so between 25 and 28 acres of land. Died on September 4th, 1691. He's buried at Montreal. He was 74 years old, and he and Marguerite would have been married 43 years. By 1703, Marguerite herself would pass on, dying at the age of 74 as well. And she was buried at Pointe Saint-Tremble, where she had been living with one of her children. Upon her death, not upon her death, but actually by 1729, we have 322 descendants coming just from that couple. And as you can see, they didn't have a tremendous amount of children. So that is truly a remarkable thing. Information for you. Louis Loiselle is featured in our French-Canadian Ancestor, and that is in volume 18. And I posted a link for you. You can go and have a look on the Facebook group, our Free French-Canadian Ancestors. They have that file available. And also, if you ever are able to find that book, that is where he is featured. It's tremendous. It really gives you lots of insight. And this is also from that same volume on page 154. We have all the variations of the Loiselle name, which really, are amazing. We have Choisy, Loiselle, Loiseau, Loiselette, Loiselle with 2 L's, Loiselle, Loiselle with a Y, Synode, Sinon, Venet, and Visnet. Also, interestingly enough, Campbell, Lisotte, Loiselle, 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 different spellings, and Loiselle. So you want to make sure that when you're verifying your ancestry that you're kind of looking around to see, does anything actually work out, and how does that connection, and that a lot of times it has to do with the D name and just variations on that same theme. So for more information about this family, we have The Women of Sainte Marie, The Pioneers of 17th Century Montreal, written by Susan McNally. I cannot recommend this book highly enough. It will have information on Marguerite and that family, but it will also give you insight as to what kind of a life they led. So I really urge you to pick that book and up. It's on Amazon, so have a look at that. And then I found, remember we looked at the different variations? So Loiselle genealogy blog. It's a little, I think it's not being kept up to date, but it's got lots of interesting information. So I wanted to feature it, and I put the address up for you as well. And now the resources I use constantly. I wanted to stress the family associations. We have the Quebec Family History Society, which is based in Quebec. We have the French Canadian Heritage Society of Michigan. Fabulous, fabulous site. They have a lovely book that they publish, journal. And the American Canadian Genealogical Society, I'm just getting to know them. And I'm a member of the American French Genealogical Society of Rhode Island. Absolutely amazing information that they give. So I urge you to look up this information and just see if there's one society in particular you would like to join, just to kind of belong to a group, and it really does help in terms of being able to connect up with like-minded people. So I would encourage you to do that. So, end episode 31. Marguerite Charlot really was a pioneer of Montreal. It's not often that we get to hear and see and really delve into the beginnings of a place. And Marguerite was there, truly there, and presumably was one of the pioneer women who helped other women, because she was there a long time before anybody else. And obviously her firstborn was the first child to survive and thrive. So I'm fascinated to know how many of you, if any, are descended from the first Jeanne, and if that's your descendancy. So please let me know in the comments below how you are. 322 descendants is a remarkable feat. And we want to just acknowledge Marguerite. I mean, she came over at 15 with Maisonneuve and just kind of, dedicated her life to being a pioneer of Montreal and of New France. So we bless her memory. We are thankful that she came to our shores, and we are grateful for her contribution. And before I let you go, I want to thank my patrons and supporters for their support and their, whether it's financial or just sending me an email or encouraging me. I absolutely appreciate every contact. So thank you so much. And with that being said, I'll see you on episode 32. Until then, au revoir.